the more people you know that are operators or even passive investors, the more deal flow you'll have. And I think at the end of the day, the more deal flow you have, the more options you have, the better decisions you can make because you have that abundance when it comes to the opportunities that you have.
Welcome to The Path to Wealth, the show about well-being, fulfillment, and financial freedom. And I'm your host, Hannes Henchi. Hello, welcome back to The Path to Wealth. I'm your host, Hannes Henchi. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Jeffrey Donis. The managing partner of Donis Investment Group, Jeffrey's investment firm specializes in 100-plus unit apartment complexes. And together with their partners, they have successfully invested in over 1,000 units. A business graduate of the University of Carolina, Jeffrey is truly passionate about educating others on the benefits of investing in multifamily real estate. Remarkably, even in his 20s, he has already raised funds and embarked on his journey in investing in multifamily syndications. And that's something that I'm personally very interested about, like the mindset that you and your brothers developed in such a young age. And first of all, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on it. I really appreciate it, and would also just want to let everyone know my twin brother was the one that went to UNC Chapel Hill, and we can get into this too, but we actually all left school before actually graduating college, so it's an interesting background and reason why we did it. But like I said, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to have the conversation.
Yeah, of course. And then where did the mindset come from for all of you to, get so business serious and sincere at such an early age?
Yeah, so to give you a little background, I'm based in Durham, North Carolina. I work with my two brothers. One of them is my older brother. His name's Kenneth. He's 24. My twin brother and I are 21. Kerwin is my twin. And we were all in college about 4 years ago. That's when we first got started. Now, to give you more of a background as to how we grew up, we were raised by our single mother, who was an immigrant from Guatemala. And that's a third world country in Central America. So she comes from a very humble beginning, and it was the summer of my the winter break. So halfway through my freshman year of college back in 2021, it was right before the pandemic happened. I went to Guatemala for the first time, and obviously growing up with, one parent and her obviously not, being able to get a high paying job. She was always a hard worker, and I'd see that, but there was a scarcity of money. So I was always told to turn the lights off when I'd walk out of a room, or not to waste food, or to not leave the TV on too long, or not watch TV all day. So all these small things led to me wanting to become financially free, or having that seed was planted at a very early age. So once we were in college, as I mentioned, we went to Guatemala and got to firsthand experience as to what my mom had been telling us growing up, in regards to how her upbringing was and how, different it was from ours. Here, they tell you that you're low income, and then you actually go and see what real low income looks like in another third world country, where you have to boil your water for to take a hot shower. Really, you're washing dishes with water that's been sitting there all day. To flush the toilet, you have to dump water into the toilet. Things like that you just don't even realize it's actually happening. So when I came back, my brothers and I realized that we have this opportunity here in America, that my siblings, or not siblings, but my cousins and aunts and uncles don't. So once we got back, we had already heard of what wholesaling real estate was, and sort of how that was an entry gate for a lot of different investors, and why that was something that we thought we could do. So fast forward, eventually we started taking a lot of action, and I saw how hard my mom was working. I knew that she sacrificed a lot to come here and then to provide the life that she's given us. She still works hard to this day, so our goal remains to retire her as soon as possible. And that's kind of the backstory as to why we got into real estate and why we're motivated to continue.
I love that. I think I've rarely heard a more inspiring why, because I love that you guys got it when you hit ground over there, that everything connected what your mom has been telling you for years.
Yeah.
And that it also translated into a sense of service, like gratitude and appreciation. So yeah, I really want to acknowledge you for that, because I don't think it naturally would go like that for everybody. So which probably also speaks to the upbringing that your mom gave you, that, that this translated in your head to like, let's take action, let's be grateful, and let's take this opportunity at hand and get into real estate.
Yeah, and I'll add on to it. I don't say all this to make it seem like it's our sob story, but in fact, I think it's the opposite, as you mentioned. I'm very grateful for the way I was raised, because I know how difficult, and I don't necessarily know from firsthand experience, but based on stories that I've read and other parents that I actually speak with at events, they'll ask me, how can I get my kid motivated like you guys, or how can I get my kid to do things that for me was I never really needed someone to tell me to do them. I just had that innate desire, and
Yeah.
I've started asking myself, why am I so motivated? It's just something, and I think I was blessed by God to want to go and become financially free, and the way that He manifested that in my life has been growing up with a single mom, low income. Therefore, I don't come from wealth, and being someone that doesn't come from sort of a I guess a financially stable background, you automatically are ingrained with this innate desire to want to pursue some type of financial independence and have some type of abundance in your life. And I see that as the biggest
Yeah.
blessing because as a man, I get to grow up and chase after something. And obviously I know it's materialistic in the sense of money, but it's more so having a purpose that I get to go after. And once, I start hitting those goals, I think that's one of the biggest blessings that I get to get from God, is that I'm able to actually do things that I want to, and do them and achieve them. And a lot of people, I think, especially around my age and that I know, don't have that burning desire to achieve something like that at this young of an age. And being able to do that, just have the willingness and the persistence to do it in itself is fruitful.
I think you're 100% right. And I remember me being in high school, I was one of the few kids in school who knew what they wanted to do and just went after it. And others, they were like, I have no clue what I want to do. And now, like a couple of decades later, I've also seen a lot of kids from very wealthy families. They just don't know what to do. They don't have the drive you have, because like the worst that can happen to them is that they sit on their parents' estate in the Hamptons, and have a private chef cook for them. And that's like the lowest that they can
Right.
fall to. So someone like you, the hardship actually turned into a purpose and a mission, and it motivates you and it gives you like really something to strive for. And I can already see that, once you have a certain level of accomplishment, you will turn around and you will serve people in that community back home.
Yeah, 100%. And I think to add on that, I think you can give even when you don't have, I guess, quote unquote, a lot of money or wealth, but 100%. That's why I truly do feel insanely grateful beyond explanation for the circumstance that I have and that I grew up in, because I have my brothers and we get to chase after these things, and we are trying to. I like to think there's a reason that I potentially am not where I thought I'd be over the last 4 years, because maybe I wasn't mentally prepared to, go into those successes, because maybe I was too immature or something like that. I wouldn't have done things correctly with the money that I would have gotten or whatever. But when it comes to, just like I mentioned, being able to actually have something that you're striving for, and the best feeling for me is when you're able to do that for yourself versus, like you said, having it given to you. It seems like, I don't know how else it would have been differently, but I wouldn't want it to have been any different.
Let's unpack what you just said a little bit. You said that maybe 4 years ago or so, if you would have been equally successful, you would have done different things with the money. And that's something that I can deeply relate to. But how did you uncover that, and maybe what was the shift for you?
Yeah, so over the last year, I've gotten very much into my faith, and that's not something that I was when I first got started. I wasn't actively in my faith when I first got started in my entrepreneurship journey. So once that started, you can imagine what a 18-year-old kid who thinks he's going to become a millionaire in a year would want to do with money, right? Go buy cars, thinks that materialistic things are actually
I've
going
been
to bring
there.
him happiness, and that's the purpose of life, is to go after and be rich and all these things. Now, obviously, I'm not saying I don't like nice things or that I don't still want to pursue these kinds of materialistic endeavors, but for me at this point, I can seriously in my heart, and I always try to ask myself this from a subconscious and like a personal level of sort of understanding as to why I'm doing what I'm doing. And on top of that, if I lost it all today, would my identity be in that? And do I identify and I idolize the successes, or my how many deals I'm doing, or what kind of car I'm driving, all of these things? Because I think if I ever say yes, I am doing those things, then I'm pretty much setting myself up to fail, I think. So instead now I put that into my faith, and I have this open hands approach now, which I'm not saying I'm perfect at. I still struggle every day with it, but back then I didn't see it that way. I saw, if I close a deal today, I'm happy and I had a good day. Or if I make this amount of money this month, I had a good month. And if I didn't, I didn't. So I think when you approach things that way, like I said, I think you're setting yourself up to fail, and that's what I was doing. But now, as I've grown in my faith and I'm still growing and still learning about it, I've been able to sort of put that into something that is abundant and infinite. And when I see it that way, obviously you still get bothered by not hitting your goals, or you still get happy when you do hit your goals, which I think is there's a reason that I have that in me and desire. It's not like there's no purpose behind it, but I don't idolize it. So that's one way that it's different. And then on top of it, I've maybe a little bit more selfish in the beginning. I perhaps wasn't as open to helping people, or really understanding what I would do with if I when I come into abundance of wealth or time, opportunity. Now I think I'm in a better position to actually understand how I can help people and things like that. So it's been like a growing, developing concept and thought process on my end, and I'm still learning and going through it. But I can see that there has been, fortunately, some type of change, and I hope that it's in a good direction.
Yeah, I like that. One of the mental models that I started using in the last couple, maybe month, is to think about in the history of mankind, there have been roughly 117 billion people on this planet.
Mm,
And out of all of those, even just by technological default, medical advancements and stuff, you and me are not living just in the 1%, because you and me already live in the 1% in the world now.
right.
So you and me are like the 1% of the 1% in history of mankind.
Yeah.
The kind of possibilities, comforts, travel, leisure, technology. It's like whenever I look at that, I just have to be grateful all day long, no matter how bad the day might feel in terms, like you said, maybe we didn't win a deal, maybe we didn't make that money. But I always remind myself that just from the human evolution,
Yeah.
like life has never been better.
For sure. And sometimes I think it's not to say this in an extreme way, but to our detriment that it's so comfortable and so easy to
Yeah.
quote unquote just we have it fine. I mean, as long as you're surviving, is that necessarily what we should be after and striving after? In my opinion, it's more so trying to thrive, right? And like I said, I think making sure you have the right heart posture towards the right things, but also I try my best, and I'm like you said, both of us are in this awesome position where we don't have to, hopefully, not just speak like I know exactly what you lived through, but we have certain things like we're not in a war infested area, or there's not like diseases around us all the time, and like there are in third world countries, and our water isn't hopefully contaminated and small things like that.
Yeah.
But I try to put myself in these uncomfortable situations all the time in my business and things like that, and then learn to work through it, because business is a big metaphor, or anything really is a big metaphor for life, right? Like something bad happens, I mean, to the body, it feels the same. So my business, I always try to be doing things that are right outside of my comfort zone. And I know this sounds cliche, but as I've done that, not only does the business grow rapidly, but I grow rapidly too. And as soon as I'm out of that and I'm back in my comfort zone, now I'm actually more uncomfortable doing that, because it feels like I'm not doing anything. And I think that's God's way of telling me you have to keep doing these things, because that's how you're going to grow, and that's how you're going to get closer to your
Yeah.
purpose.
I can relate to both of what you said. I'm at a point that if I don't grow, if I'm just like, it's really uncomfortable
Yeah.
for me. Like if I'm not learning, if I'm not curious, if I'm not building, creating, I'm like, unless I'm intentionally like pulling back and I'm
Right.
maybe just in a space where I want to take 3 days to meditate, that's different. But if I'm just like doing nothing as like a sense of time pass, I'm getting really uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think that's good. That's something that I've gone through phases in my business where I have to sort of take the foot off the gas, and it's important to rest and, like you said, meditate. I think that's a great way to put it. But I even think that's not even resting, right? That's giving some time to think, which is not necessarily rest. I think the opposite approach would be to retreat, which I don't think anyone should ever
Yeah.
do, right? We should always, I think we should all, I try to always be moving towards something, even if that's a new idea. It's something that still takes some action. So as long as you're taking action, I mean, that's really the best thing that my brothers and I are good at. We're not the most intelligent people in the room, obviously. Didn't go to like Ivy League schools or things like that. But one way or the other, we take action, and we don't need to know everything before we do that.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that you and your brothers are taking action on right now?
Yeah, so as you know, we invest in multifamily, and we're real estate investors at the end of the day. So where we see opportunity, that's where we'll invest our resources, our time, and capital into. So multifamily has been going through certain, difficulties overall, to say it in a blanket statement. I think that's very general, but in our multifamily journeys, we've noticed that a lot of deals aren't penciling right now. So what we've been doing to stay busy and keep our investors, continuing to build those financial relationships with us, I think it's important to offer them opportunities, or else that capital, like it or not, will find its home somewhere else. And I think I like to think we're the best stewards for their capital. So I want to continue building relationships with new investors, as well as continuing to nurture and develop the ones that we already have. So currently we've been actually doing a lot of single family acquisitions here in North Carolina, and we've Simply put, it's a fix and flip operation that we're running. So just while multifamily doesn't always make sense, we are still looking at smaller deals in our area, potentially just bringing on a smaller amount of investors. And then on the fix and flip side, we're raising a lot of private money for that and giving some solid returns that I think a lot of our investors are excited about. But that's really what's been keeping us busy. It's interesting to me how fast we can grow the acquisition side of it. Now, I know there's a lot of debate whether or not it's a good time to do it, but I think it all depends on the area, and it's been a fun last few months.
Yeah, I think you have to really look into the pockets of where are you flipping,
Hmm.
and every market has its own dynamics. Like for example, in New York City where I'm located, rents are again through the roof. We're hitting record marks, and there is no sign of slowdown of people like moving back into the city.
Hmm.
But you don't have that same kind of traffic like some of the investments we have in the south. We weren't able to raise rents.
Right.
So it always depends like what kind of pockets are you in, and hopefully where you guys are flipping right now, it all makes sense.
Yeah.
How do you think people are dealing with the interest rate hike, given that just the reality is that the same couple can't afford the same kind of house anymore as they could like 2 3 years ago?
Yeah. So right now, I mean, as I'm sure you know, a lot of people aren't selling because a lot of the people that would be selling or would be sellers in this
Yeah.
time period are locked into a fixed rate that was, locked in maybe last year, 2 years ago when interest rates were a lot lower. So they don't really want to sell right now because they would have to go find a new home, meaning they'd have to put new debt
Yeah.
on it at a higher interest rate. And for a lot of these people, they're looking at it based on what their monthly payment would be. So if your monthly payment goes up, four or 500, maybe even upwards closer to $1,000 a month because of the new interest rate that you'd have to get, they're looking at that saying, I don't see why I would sell right now. I'd rather just wait. Especially if you're not forced to sell, which a lot of these people aren't, right? They're homeowners. So that's one thing that we're seeing, and that's leading to a lower supply of inventory when it comes to housing. But I think there's interesting takes on where things will go over the next few months. That's why I think it's so important to look where you're investing locally, and that's another reason why multifamily. There's still a lot of demand for the properties that we're in ownership on in the markets that we're in, because it doesn't make sense to buy right now. People still need places to live, so they're going to continue renting.
Yeah, I think that trend is certainly strong. A renter's nation, and we've heard that from different people in the industry. But I think at large, it's very much true that we're turning towards people want to rent. They want to be more flexible. They don't want to own.
Hmm.
I would also say a lot of people your my age, they don't want to deal with the upkeep of a
Yeah.
house and the additional work, because maybe we put more time or more value on our time, and I don't want to spend every week out and fixing up something around the house on my day off.
Yeah.
It's just not what I'm interested
Oh,
in.
for sure, and that's why a lot of people right now. It seems like a lot of the houses that we're listing are flying off the market, and it's interesting to see that a lot of people will say that's going to change. Like if there's a growth in supply, which can happen very quickly if one of these big REIT dumps their portfolio
Yeah.
for whatever reason. But real estate's sticky, right? So it typically takes some time for things to change, and I would hope that we can at least see something coming before. But I still think on both sides of it, whether you're renting or buying, as an investor, as long as you're trying to analyze and make an educated decision based on what you're seeing in the data and hearing from other people, I think either way, you should always be investing. So I don't think that's an excuse not to do something.
Yeah, I think there's obviously sometimes you have to be cautious, more cautious than other periods. There's periods to be bullish,
Mhm.
but I think, as you said, capital seeks a home, and I think if you can make sense of the numbers and you can pivot there in every cycle, there's an investment to be made.
Yeah. It's also interesting that I hear from different operators, some are raising capital faster than they've ever raised capital, while personally, and I think a lot of other people, maybe the majority, are experiencing difficulty when it comes to raising capital. Now, obviously, I think that depends on the deal and the team, right? So on certain deals, I do not struggle to raise at all. On some, I think it would be. For instance, multifamily is probably a difficult time for me to raise capital in right now. But when it comes to other projects that I have, it's a little quicker. So that being said, I think that is a testament to the demand for investment opportunities. And I speak with a lot of my investors, and they just aren't seeing deal flow right now. A lot of the deals look
Yeah.
the same, the low cash flow for multifamily, for example. What I always like to, and it's find it funny, is Warren Buffett always says, you're supposed to buy when people are fearful. And right now, everyone's scared, in my opinion. But it seems like no one wants to buy either, so I don't know.
But I'm not sure if people are actually fearful, or as what you said earlier, it's like it doesn't quite pencil.
Mm,
And then obviously there's different motivations for different
yeah,
investors. The people that are looking for cash flow, they're spoiled by like the last or last
right,
decade rather, where they were like double digit cash flow.
yeah,
And now they're like, what, you're giving me 4% or something? That's like, why would I do that?
yeah. Well, obviously I don't think everyone is quote unquote scared, but I do, based on the conversations that I've had with my investors, they're just going to wait because they don't know what's going to happen with the economy or interest rates. They see the war in Russia and Ukraine, things like that, and it's just uncertain times.
Yeah.
So they'd rather. Now, granted, like one thing that a lot of the people that I'm talking to are doing is they're just dumping their money in the T bills that are offering pretty strong returns. And if you can do that on a triple A rated bond, why wouldn't you do that? Is some of the questions that I'm getting. But I think
Yeah.
it's a unique situation that we're in, obviously, in all fronts. But that's why I think some people are scared. Some people are just thinking there's better opportunity elsewhere, or just want to stay liquid for the right opportunity.
I think the last point that you just said is like, you can go into short-term T-bills right now and your overall return profile isn't like that bad, but you're not locked up in like an average deal maybe for 5 years,
Yeah,
which could easily happen if you pick the wrong horse in the multifamily deals right now. And as you said, the deal flow is down. So investors don't have that kind of abundance of choice
right.
to pick from right now. So maybe they're more cautious as to where they want to put their money right now.
Yeah, and I don't blame them. I think it's important to be patient, but I also don't know if patience is something that you want to be too long, right? Because I mean, if you're just sitting on it and not doing something with it, you're losing money. So it's hard for an investor right now. I think that's why, in my opinion, the number one thing that I always like to talk about, and it's my role within my company, is to always have a really strong network. Not only can you tap into
Yeah,
people and what they're seeing and their knowledge, but also the more people you know that are operators or even passive investors, the more deal flow you'll have. And I think at the end of the day, the more deal flow you have, the more options you have, the better decisions you can make because you have that abundance when it comes to the opportunities that you have.
I agree. I think in general, if you want to be a rainmaker in your own life, you have to be proactive, outward facing, connecting with
Mm-hmm.
people, and creating that abundance, whether it's deal flow or it's just people that you can connect with if you have questions. Because otherwise, you will always have scarcity, and scarcity leads to fear. Someone who doesn't know that there's potentially thousands of multifamily deals that they can participate in,
Yeah.
they will look at the bad one and be like, oh, but this is the only one that I can invest in. And one of my first investments, unfortunately, went down like that because I didn't know about the abundance of
Right.
potential partnerships that I could be. And it wasn't a real estate investment. It was like, it was a restaurant in New York City. And I had the chance to get involved, but I didn't have abundance.
Mm.
It's not that I looked at 100 deals and I was like, this is my deal.
Right.
It was like the deal. And in hindsight, I was like, this was really dumb. But I guess the learning I got out of it was really valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great point. And I think obviously the more options that you have, one, I think the more educated you'll get because you'll look at more deals and you'll be able to ask more questions, get more answers, and over time you'll become more in tune and educated in regards to making good decisions. On top of that, just in general, the more of something that you have, the more likely that you'll have a really good one. And for whatever reason, my mind goes to dating. Like if I only see two potential date partners, chances are, what if they're both not good date partners? And I only
Yeah.
get to pick from one of the two. But if I have 100, chances are I'll be able to pick the top, top of the bucket, I guess, or you know what I mean. So uh,
If they're still available after you went through the other 99.
exactly, got to make a quick decision. That's a good point. Yeah,
That's a concept that sounds probably extremely wild for people, but that like in order to find your best spouse, you might actually
yeah,
sincerely speak to 100, 200 people.
yeah. That's a whole topic that my brothers and I talk about all the time. But that's one reason why we're all not looking for partners right now. We're single because I think as time goes on, quote unquote, like we'll be able to meet more people, talk to more people, and not be in any rush. So maybe right now at 21, there's only a small amount of people under me that in regards to age, and I'm looking for someone that's younger. So like you start to get older and become a little bit more mature and successful and things like that. And I think the abundance of different potential spouses grows. And I take the same approach with my investments. So the more time I kind of, not to say that there's like a fear of pulling the trigger in finding an investment, but the more time you give it, the better you get at analyzing deals and building those relationships. The more deal flow you get, or spouses that potentially get to meet and date, and the higher likelihood that you'll find one that actually makes sense and that is the best out of all of them. So
Yeah. And I think, again, it's about you don't want to rush into the deal like I did with one deal. But you also, what you said earlier, you don't just want to be passive and wait for too long, because then you're not creating any value. In fact, you're losing value. So it's kind of in between those, whether it's a spouse or a deal, I guess.
yeah, but I think the spouse is one that everyone can relate to. It's a perfect metaphor for investment. Really, it's the biggest investment you'll make.
It honestly is. I mean, it takes a lot of energy and time, and Naval Ravikant has a great quote. He's like, you want to pick somebody who like naturally goes well with you.
Yeah.
Like, if you say something just because you like to say it and they think it's funny, like it doesn't get any better than that.
Right. That's true.
Or if there's like this natural understanding of things, I think that takes out a lot of the, obviously, I think at the end of the day, there's still a lot I always think about a relationship as two circles that are overlaying at some degree, but for a large part, they're not.
Yeah.
So the question is, how much of that common ground do you share? And how high on your personal priority list is what you actually share? And I think the more of that you can find and the more natural that feels, the easier the relationship will unfold.
Yeah, you're way more experienced than me in relationships. You're married, I think, right?
Yeah, I'm married.
I'm still single, and I'm looking to be single for a little bit more, so I can't really give too much insight. But I agree. I think, yeah, like with my brothers, even just relationships in general, there are certain things. Obviously, we're not. I even have an identical twin, but we're not the same in a lot of ways. But the main things that we value, like our faith, our work ethic, what our why is, as we already spoke on, things like that are sort of I like to call what's the word for it?
Negotiable.
Yeah, non-negotiables. Yeah. So there's just certain things that we're just going to have to meet on, or we can't work together. Unfortunately, it worked out. So it's the most important thing, I think. And in fact, even with anyone in your life, there are certain things that I think there should be some non-negotiables on. Obviously, you're gonna have people that are different, but whether you're looking at who you're investing with or who you're going to partner with or marry, all of those things I think apply.
Yeah. Yeah, we've spoken a lot about business partnerships on the podcast, and I think same thing applies. Like, you want to check off those big ones, like whether it's like if you're heavy in faith and you have a long-term trajectory, you don't want to partner up with somebody who doesn't care and who's just trying to make a quick buck, because it's just
Yeah.
conflict of interest is predetermined.
100%. One thing that I always like to think of is if you're in the certain scenario where you can make one of two decisions. One will maybe burn a bridge, or you'll quote unquote do someone wrong if you make that decision, but you'll make a lot of money pretty quickly. A lot of times, and for me, that's why I like my business partners to have some type of faith in their life, because if you're not accountable to something higher than yourself, then what's stopping you from just making a fleshly choice of going after the money? And for me, it's not about that at this point, right? So if I know that I can't make that decision, because even if I'm going to lose money or not make as much because I'm accountable to something higher than myself and I will get convicted for it, then I wouldn't make that decision. And I know, fortunately, my brothers and I share that. Obviously, we have to keep each other accountable, and sometimes we're not perfect, but there are a lot of other people in my life that I could have worked with, and you kind of just get glimpses of certain things like that. And I think it's always a better decision to not go into business with them. So that's one thing that I do look for.
Yeah, I also think there is something to be said about building really solid foundational long-term relationships. Like, what does it matter if we make a quick buck? Even if it seems sizable right now in the scope of our life, most paydays where you screw someone won't be that significant. But first of all, you in your conscious will always know, you will always remember that you screwed someone.
Yeah.
And that's a dark spot in your conscious that will never go away. And then the other part is other people definitely know.
Yeah.
And like, for example, in real estate, our industry is very small to some degree. Like, people know people.
Yeah.
And if there's a single rotten apple, people are like, yeah, I don't know. Even if it's just like, yeah, if they don't want to say it out public, but there's like hesitant. I always like to say you need raving fans, whether they are your business partners or your investors, or like the more raving fans you have that speak to your character and your conduct, the easier it is to do business for you. And I think, again, you mentioned Warren Buffett. He's one of the best examples. The guy was able to do a certain kind of deal that nobody else is able to do because of who he is and how he's conducted himself over decades. Like if somebody brings a business deal to him, they know it's going down a certain way. He's not going to try to cut them out crazy. He's going to make a fair deal, and he will do it over a weekend, over a handshake.
Yeah, no, I think that's powerful, and like you said, the raving fans piece. It's and this is cliche, but it's so true. It's so easy to. It's hard to build a reputation. It takes a long time and a good track record, and like you said, a fan, not a fan base, but people that are supportive of you and speak well of you. That's something that does take time, but you can burn one person, and that can pretty much tarnish that relationship pretty quickly. So it's very important, and it is difficult. I won't say it's as easy as just listening to your conscience, because we're obviously not perfect human beings, right? We're gonna like make mistakes, and sometimes you'll think you're making the best judgment call, and it might not be the best call overall.
Yeah.
The way that I like to approach that is by always talking to people that I consider mentors when I'm making certain decisions that I'm not really sure about, or if you do make the wrong choice or mistake, just being willing to be humble enough and say, you know what, man, like I messed up. I'm sorry, like that wasn't right of me. So there's two ways I think that you can typically like make those decisions. It is difficult though. I'm not sure if you ever approached a scenario where you tried your best and like you thought that was the right choice, but maybe it wasn't. I think that having the humility to be able to go back and fix it is honestly the most important thing, because it's not like you're not expected to, or you're expected to not make mistakes, you know?
Yeah. And sometimes I would say there are situations where even if you can go back in, it doesn't mean it will actually fix it. And sometimes it just you just have to look at it and be like, learned my lesson. I know I screwed up here. I know I can't really fix
Yeah.
it, but this will not happen again.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like there's, for example, again, also maybe in relationships with like, given that we spoke about spouse,
Yeah.
there will be lessons that we learn maybe long after we've been with somebody. We're like, oh my God, like this might have been something that I was bringing up over and over again there, and it was actually not good for the other person. But I only learned that lesson maybe 5-10 years later. And then you can have, if you're still in touch, you can have the humility and go and say, hey, I think I learned something 5-10 years later.
Yeah.
And they might acknowledge it. But the end of the day is you just have to take the lesson learned into your life and be a better human being, and you pay it forward. And by paying it forward to other people, you're kind of acknowledging that moment you shared with the other person in the past.
Yeah. And I think by being an entrepreneur and just taking so much action, especially if you're taking the amount of action that it takes to become a successful entrepreneur, you're bound to mess up in certain cases. And
Yeah.
it's all about having grace with yourself, but also being humble enough to, like you said, even if you can't fix it, just moving forward with it. Learning from it is obviously very important, not to keep doing that same thing if it was something that you think was wrong. But I think it's important to have grace with yourself too, because if you're, this kind of person that's going to be a negative, or have that, be negative in your mind and maybe potentially prohibit you from taking more action, it's not like it'll benefit you if you do that, right? So definitely being graceful with that, I try to do as well.
I really like the word grace, not as a word, but I think in American language, grace describes it the best. It's like when you're being faithful, and there are certain situations, conversations that just feel like, grace is there. And I feel like the more I align myself to living in grace, the more everything seems to fall into place.
Yeah, likewise. I like to call it green lights. It's I don't know if you read Matthew
Yeah.
McConaughey's book, maybe.
Yeah, I read it.
Okay,
Yeah.
I love that. The way he puts it, it's a metaphor for life when you feel like you're going downhill. You're going at like maybe not a fast pace, but it seems like things are just falling into place and they're smoothly and sort of easily happening the way that you are hoping that they would happen. And that's a part of my business that I'm in right now. And sort of now that I've started implementing a little bit more grace on myself and others, like you said, it seems like that is something that I'm experiencing as well.
Yeah. And I think between the things you said, you need to put in a lot of effort in the entrepreneurial journey. And again, it takes probably like a lot more than what people think. It takes a lot of activity and action and networking to make things happen. But at the same time, if you can pair that with trying to live in grace and being faithful, I think that's where it becomes really powerful, because otherwise you're also just burning yourself out with activity,
Yeah.
and that activity might not stem from the best place.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And that's why I always like to have these internal dialogues with myself. I really, it could be with you, or I do with God and things like that. And you start to really just do that on a consistent basis. And my goal, and I think for a lot of other people, if they did that on a consistent basis, is you'd eventually be able to. If your heart is not in the right place, then hopefully over time you start to realize that, and you're a little bit more, I guess, aware is the right word of why you're doing things. And then it changes over time, and hopefully you can even guide the ship towards that direction.
I think life nudges you. The way I look at it is that whenever I wasn't paying attention, life turned up the volume and just give me a harder beating. And
Mm,
then the question is, how long do you want to remain ignorant and being punched in the face? I always feel like life is telling you to live differently.
mm. Yeah, I like to see.
And
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, yeah, it's just like it will naturally turn up the volume if you don't get that message, and eventually you will get the message
Yeah.
unless you're very ignorant to the message.
Well, yeah. One thing you said, two things. So the volume piece. I don't know if you meant it this way, but one way that it resonated with me was, for me, there's like a voice in your head. For me, it's God talking to me, telling me certain things, and as I've listened to it more and more, it gets louder and louder. So therefore, I'm a little bit more in tune, I would say, uh, in regards to where I think I should be, what I should be doing, maybe where my heart posture should be in certain cases and things like that. But on top of it, um, the more that I forgot my first point, but that was can you just refresh me what you just said? I don't want to lose it. Maybe it'd come back.
Yeah, so I was saying that with every action you take in life, it's like, either you get more in tuned, and if not, I feel like life is pounding you in a way. It's
Yeah,
it's turning up the volume, not necessarily in the way that actually what you referred to, like tuning into maybe the voice,
yeah,
is for me that's following intuition more, and like, hey, this is a graceful moment.
mm,
This is what I should double down on.
yeah,
And
yeah.
the alternative of what I was referring to with like the volume goes up, it's like something actually negative. I'm on a downward
Right.
spiral, but I'm not getting it. I'm not getting the message.
Yeah,
But life is just pounding me more to give me the message.
yeah. I remember now. Thank you. And I love what you said. For me, I see it as natural consequences. So if I do something, let's say it's binge drinking every single weekend, yes, you might think that it's just a good thing and like it's a good way to let loose or enjoy life. That's one way to look at it. But on the side, maybe you don't see it, but over time, those have natural consequences. So perhaps you're doing something
Yeah.
negatively in your business, even if you do quote unquote like repent and stop doing it. Eventually, maybe it's fine now, like you've now changed internally, but still those actions, even if you've forgiven yourself or maybe you're in now a better state of mind about it, you still might have to face those consequences. So that's why I think one, it's important to obviously try not to make the wrong decisions, but even if you do make those decisions, sometimes you're gonna have to deal with the consequences one way or the other. So I agree.
Yeah. I like that. Man, I must say you're extremely reflected. Like if I look back when I was your age, I was a bit of a nutbag compared to, the kind of conversation you're able to have already.
Yeah, yeah, it's come with. I mean, I'm still like obviously learning a lot um, on this
Yeah.
journey, but I think like I do like to have these discussions with my brothers all the time, and it's really a blessing to be able to grow up with people. I live with them, been with them my whole life, so I don't know if you have anyone like this in your life, and I'm sure it's your spouse. I would hope that's what my spouse would be, but literally from the time I wake up to the time I go to bed, that's the kind of discussions that I'm having, whether that's internal or with them. And sometimes it helps to be able to put that thought out and sort of speak it out loud. If it kind of sounds dumb, that's fine. But what I'll do is just have that discussion and have someone that can talk back about it. And over time, it just happens so much. The compound effect is real. I'm not saying I figured anything out, but I do think just asking a lot of questions and being open and having someone to talk to it about it can help, regardless of what we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think you're refining your experience of life,
Yeah,
and the better you are to express it, and the more intuitively you are to understand, I'm like, hey, this is my path, this is my journey, this feels right, this feels like I'm getting off track. I think the more so everything will fall into place, as we follow that kind of
yeah.
intuitive and reflected version of ourselves.
Yeah, I think that the goal most people either have or maybe they don't know that they have, but I think it should be a goal that everyone has. Is just to find that place where you have a purpose, where you wake up every day and not like you're just going and through the motions and doing things because you feel like you have to, but more so having this what Napoleon Hill describes as a burning desire and a fulfillment in your heart. And obviously, people think they can fill that void with different things, but I personally think there's only one thing that will fill that void. So we're all on the journey to discover what that is, and it seems like other people may
Yeah.
get there sooner or later, or maybe you may think you'll never get there, but I think there's a reason that there's a desire for it. So having those internal dialogues and having people to talk about, I think, is on you're on the right journey and on the right path.
Yeah, and I think those things that take you off track but seem like something, they eventually fade out. Like, and actually, just this week, it's like a maybe funny example, but I was eating things that I like, but I was eating them at a quantity that was just more. And then I realized, as much as I love it, the indulgence actually makes the experience less joyful.
Mm.
And and I think the same is true for just about anything that you just do out of time past pleasure. It will wear off, and it will point you to something more significant for yourself.
Yeah, I love that. So one thing that I've realized over the last month, or sorry, year, is there's a lot of things that my describe it as fleshly desires that I have, temptations. For example, it could be I love food. That's my biggest vice, I would say. Like you said, I fast now. Over the last 2 months, I've been having this new diet where I'll fast all day and I only eat from 5 to 6 p.m. and I try to eat really healthy. So throughout the week, I'll do that. And when you break fast and just you can eat whatever it is, it tastes so good. It could literally be vegetables. It tastes
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah.
But as soon as on the weekend comes and I start eating whatever I want, and I sometimes go a little heavy on the eating to make up for what I didn't eat throughout the week, you start to like your taste buds quickly start to get back to where they were, and now ice cream doesn't even taste that good. So it's so true, and I think the
Isn't
more
that
we can
funny?
say no to everything,
Yeah.
like anything, I'm using food as a metaphor, but this applies to everything. I think whether that's video games, like my brother likes to call it dopamine. So as soon as you're sort of limiting what your dopamine exposure is, the more you can do that, the easier. And I honestly think the more aware you are of the small things that actually matter and they can actually make you happy. A lot of the people that, not to specifically name anyone, but like people in the world, they go and like drink, like to do drugs, like to go and do other things that give them that sense of dopamine, and they do it so much that there's no happiness in it anymore. But on a nice walk, they would like hate it because they find it boring, right? Same goes to food, same goes to business, all these things. If you can, in my opinion, like try to limit the certain things that you're exposing yourself to that you think will give you dopamine, the more likely that the more likely that you'll be able to like actually find the small things fruitful.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the more you're able to tune into those small things, the more fulfilling, because you're not looking for the big spike. You're not looking for the next investment to come through. You're not looking for the next hit, the next big party, the
Yeah,
next whatever. If you're able to enjoy those little things, and as you said, like I've fasted a lot, even the first whatever it is, it's a juice, fruit juice or a celery juice, it's just lettuce. After you haven't eaten for some time, everything seems like the best meal.
yeah, no, I love it too. It's I think hunger is the number one temptation that I have, and if I can, I'm not saying I conquer it, but if I can just learn to live with it and be able to manage it, everything else almost seems easy.
I think having a 1 hour feeding window is as close to conquering as it gets, man.
No, yeah, I agree 1,000%, and especially when there's temptations all around you. Like my older brother doesn't do this, so he'll eat whatever he
Yeah.
wants, and it smells so good, and we still, like I said, live together. So it's just it's cool to see that there's that growth, and obviously you apply this to everything, whether that's temptations, doing other things, right? It's almost, in fact, the same thing. It feels the same way. My mind doesn't really know the difference. So as I've grown that muscle,
How do you
Mhm.
how do you feel it has affected your clarity to have that kind of eating pattern?
So one way is I never knew this, but I learned it while I was already fasting, and I realized that it was true. Was I think clearer when my body isn't digesting food. I think it's
Yeah.
because it sounds pretty obvious, but for people that don't know, your body isn't obviously wasting all that energy to digesting the food. Therefore, it can apply it
Yeah.
elsewhere. And for me, I'm just clearer when I'm thinking, when I'm working, trying to, close a deal or do things like that. I have a lot more energy, and it's only after like 5 to 6, right, that I'm eating. So after that, I do feel a little bit more sluggish. But on top of it, I start to realize that a lot of the things that like society has taught me, like breakfast is the most important meal, or I have to eat, this or all these things. I'm
Yeah.
like, if this is something that is not only better for me, but I feel better and it's helping me like lose weight or get more cut, whatever I'm trying to accomplish. Like imagine all the other things that maybe aren't true. So it starts to open your mind up to all these other things. And I think the most important thing is that you're doing things that I will tell my friends what I'm doing and they think I'm crazy. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, like this is actually a big metaphor for a lot of the things that I'm trying to do and that maybe that I've done over the last few years. Kind of going against the normal
See,
grain, like pushing yourself to points that I didn't know if I could do this 2 years ago.
yeah.
I never would have seen myself doing this. Even small things like fasting, but even my business, being able to do the certain things that I'm doing now, I would never have thought I could do it. So being able to push yourself in those kind of situations seems like it's a lot of different benefits.
One of the things I kind of uncovered for on my own journey is that yes, you're going against the grain, and yes, you cannot relate to what other people around you think because they've bought into the average narrative. And the reality is that when you decided to become financially independent, you put yourself in a group of 5% of society, not 95. And the same is true when you start fasting. It's even smaller percentage of people that are willing to fast and kind of challenge
Yeah.
themselves. And that's is where your friend circle or the people you relate to just gets a lot smaller, and you have to choose that group differently because you can. Yes, the reality is we cannot relate
Yeah.
to at average people that don't care for it. But also, I think you made a great point: is there is a lot of suggestions that society makes to
Mm.
us that are not actually beneficial for us,
Yeah.
like whether it's financially or whether it's health wise. And that's, I think, you stepped into a very, very powerful space for yourself, which is taking kind of a radical responsibility for your life and just exploring it for yourself. Like, okay, if I eat like this, I feel like this,
Mm.
this actually
Mm.
seems to be the better way.
Mm.
And you just discover truth for yourself.
Yeah, yeah. There's so many benefits to like, or just so many things that I can go into based on what we're just talking about now. But one idea that and thought that came to my mind was, and after you start doing all of these things, you start to, there's ripple effects, right? They call it the butterfly effect. All the people around me now, one way or the other, a lot of my friends are now in real estate. I don't know if it's probably not because of me, but just having a group that wasn't always doing something and now they're doing it, and slowly it all starts to feed off, and I'm in different circles that they're feeding off on me. And
Yeah,
cool to see that, like how your circle can benefit if you win. That's good for everyone. So that's why it's so important to
100%.
surround yourself with
Yeah,
good people, one way or the other. Whether you're like the person that's doing a certain thing in a certain space or aspect of the life that we're living, or you're a part of a group that is sort of doing things that you want to do. All of that, you don't even realize it a lot of times, but a lot of that has a really strong pull, and a lot of times you can't really help but it get pulled into it. So that works in both directions, right? If you're trying to get away from partying and you're hanging out with people that are partying and you're in the group chat, you'll have opportunities to do it. But if you're in a group that's investing in different syndication deals and they have deal flow, I mean, chances are you're going to have deal flow too. So it's very important to not only focus on like you becoming a better version of yourself and winning and trying to get the most out of not only your time, your life. For me, it's a lot of times it's faith too, but also making sure that you're surrounding yourself with people that are trying to do the same thing.
yeah. Jeffrey, I think this was a very widespread conversation, and I want to acknowledge you for something. First of all, how early in life you started doing all of this, being so reflected. And I think the best is yet to come in so many ways. And I just know it kind of seeing my experience and other people's experience, but everything you're learning right now, I can see how you will pour it out into others. Just exactly what you just framed there is you will touch so many people's life with the personal learnings that you go through, whether it's financially or your own health journey, the journey, your relationship, exploring it with food.
Mm.
I can already see how that will benefit so many people in your family and in your friend circles and in the different fields of influence that you have. So yeah, I think that's super inspiring that someone at your age is so reflected and has such a beautiful why, wanting to take care of your mother and your extended family.
I
It's
appreciate it.
beautiful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me, Thomas. It's been an awesome conversation. Almost never get to talk about half the things we talked about, so I appreciate it.
Well, that's one of the reasons I like to have this
Yeah.
podcast this way. It's the path to wealth and wealth like well-being because it's so far beyond the money.
I couldn't agree more.
Well, Jeffrey, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, no, thank you, Hannes. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us at the Path to Wealth. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Check out our upcoming guests and be sure to share it with all your friends and family that want to take their life to the next level of wealth.